Hi students, we're going to be studying today about how the microscope led to the discovery of cells. We have been studying about organisms, microorganisms, their characteristics, their common needs, how are microorganisms and organisms different, and now we're going to be studying how the microscope led to the discovery of cells. Sorry, discovery with one R. Okay, scientists have been using lenses since ancient times. The Greek, they used what they called burning glasses to magnify images. And around the 1500s, people came up with what was called microscopes. But of course, they were very simple microscopes. They were not like the ones that we know about today that are electron microscopes, and they can magnify objects to a size that we can never imagine. Okay, so let's see. What is a microscope? Well, a microscope is an instrument that makes objects appear bigger than they really are. Okay? Why? At the beginning and those times, nobody knew that microorganisms existed. You are not able to see microorganisms with your naked eye. Impossible. So it was until scientists were using and, let's say, playing with microscopes and trying to observe everything through them that they discovered microorganisms. Okay, so it took the invention of this relatively simple tool to discover cells. And who discovered cells? Robert Hooke. Robert Hooke was a scientist who took a piece of bark from a tree, that's cork, a piece of dead bark from a tree. He took it and he placed it under the lens of a microscope. And then suddenly he saw like tiny rooms in there, tiny empty rooms. And to him, they looked like the rooms where the monks in the monasteries lived that were called cells. So that is why he gave the cell its name. That's why he named the cells cells. Okay, so he was the first one to observe dead cells. Then came Anton van Leeuwenhoek, and he was the first scientist to describe living cells. One day, he took a drop of pond water. Imagine it had rained for 5 days. That water was so dirty that nobody wanted to go near it. But he took a drop of that pond water and he said, I want to know what is inside this water. And he placed it under the lens in the microscope, and alas, my goodness, that was full of microscopic, tiny living things. He was very surprised to see things moving there. Okay, inside the pond water. Okay, so let's not forget. Okay, the microscope was invented, and Robert Hooke was the first scientist to observe dead cork cells. They were empty. They didn't have nucleus. They didn't have cytoplasm. No organelles inside, of course, because they were dead. But he could tell that that was like the basic unit of life. Now, in those days, scientists thought that only animals were made up of cells, because scientists over the world were studying and were trying to discover what about cells, and they knew, well, that guy over there, that scientist has made this discovery. Let's investigate, let's do research. Okay, so they came up with the idea that only animals were made up of cells. Another scientist in Europe discovered, listen, plants are also made up of cells. And then they discovered microorganisms. So all organisms are made up of cells. So just for the record, the invention that led to the discovery of cells was the microscope. Okay, scientists continued with research and they came up with the cell theory. The cell theory is 3 postulates that explain life. And one of the postulates says, cells come only from other cells. What does that mean? That only life can give rise to life. Okay? A cell cannot spontaneously generate from matter or from a dead thing or from a non-living thing. No, cells can only come from other cells. And then they came up with another postulate that said every living thing is made up of 1 or more cells. And another postulate, the third one, says cells are the basic unit of life. That means that cells carry out the functions that are needed to support life. You can read about the postulates on page 13. Okay, now what are we going to do? We are going to open our books to page 12 and 13. We're going to go over the concepts that we learned in this presentation, and then we're going to go to Google Docs and we are going to try to complete what I have posted in Google Docs for you. Thank you for listening.